I learned to be quiet very early in life. Not because anyone told me to. Not because I was shy, but because silence felt safer. I grew up in a house where voices could change the air in a room, where laughter could turn into tension without warning, where emotions were not explained, only felt. My parents were not cruel people. They worked hard. They did their best, but they carried their own worries, their own unspoken fears. And I learned, without realizing it, that peace came when I stayed small, when I didn't ask too many questions, when I didn't talk too much, when I didn't need too much. I was the child teachers described as well-behaved, the one who never caused trouble, the one who listened. At school, I raised my hand only when I was sure my answer was right. At home, I watched moods carefully, like weather patterns. If voices were low, I stayed quiet. If someone sighed heavily, I stayed out of the way. I thought that was maturity. I thought that was kindness. I didn't realize I was learning how to disappear. There were moments, of course, when I wanted to speak. Moments when something inside me felt big and loud and urgent. But every time I opened my mouth, I asked myself a question first. Is this important enough to risk upsetting someone? Most of the time, the answer was no. So I swallowed my words. They settled somewhere deep inside me. And over time, they became heavy. As I grew older, people praised me for being easygoing. "You're so understanding," they said. "You never make things difficult." I smiled when they said that. What they didn't see was how often I bent myself into shapes that didn't quite fit. How often I agreed when I didn't understand. How often I nodded when I wanted to ask why. I didn't know how to ask for help. Not because I didn't need it, but because needing something felt like a failure. I had learned that love was quiet, and so I made myself quiet too. In friendships, I became the listener, the one people talked to when they needed comfort. I knew everyone's stories, their heartbreaks, their fears, but they rarely knew mine. Not because I didn't trust them, but because I didn't know how to begin. Every time I thought about sharing something personal, a familiar voice whispered inside me, "Don't make it awkward. Don't be a burden. Don't take up too much space." So I smiled, and I listened. When I fell in love for the first time, I believed things would be different. Love, I thought, would give me permission to be heard. At first, it felt that way. He asked about my day. He listened when I spoke. But slowly, without noticing, I returned to old habits. I let him choose the restaurant. I let him decide what we watched. I said it's fine even when it wasn't. When something hurt me, I waited for him to notice. He didn't. Not because he didn't care, but because I never told him. Resentment grew quietly, not loud enough to be noticed, but strong enough to change how I felt. Please like the video and subscribe my channel. I remember lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why I felt lonely next to someone I loved. The truth was simple. I was still being quiet. The relationship ended not with shouting, but with confusion. He told me he felt like he never really knew me. That sentence stayed with me, because I realized he was right. I had been present, but not fully there. I had offered peace instead of truth, and I lost something real because of it. Years passed. I built a life that looked calm from the outside. A steady job, reliable routines, no drama. People described me as composed. Inside, I felt muted, like my life was happening slightly out of reach. Then one day, something small happened. Something that shouldn't have mattered as much as it did. At work during a meeting, someone took credit for an idea I had shared earlier. I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the moment where I usually stayed silent. But something inside me shifted. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was age. Or maybe I was simply tired of being invisible. I cleared my throat. My voice shook slightly as I spoke. I actually mentioned that idea last week, I said. The room went quiet. For a moment, I felt panic rise. But then someone nodded. You're right, they said. And just like that, the moment passed. Nothing terrible happened. No one was angry. No one rejected me. I sat there, heart racing, realizing something important. Speaking did not destroy peace. It created clarity. That small moment changed more than I expected. I began noticing how often I stayed silent out of habit, not choice. How often I said yes when I meant no. How often I waited to be asked instead of offering. I started practicing something new. Honesty. Not loud honesty. Not aggressive honesty. Just simple truth. I don't agree. I need help. That hurt me. At first, it felt uncomfortable. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. But slowly, it felt more natural. Like using a muscle that had been asleep for a long time. Not everyone welcomed the change. Some people were surprised. Some were confused. A few were uncomfortable. And that taught me another lesson. People who benefit from your silence may resist your voice. That does not mean you are wrong. I reconnected with my parents differently too. I asked questions I had never asked before. About their fears, their past, their mistakes. I told them things I had carried quietly for years. Not everything was easy to hear, but it was honest. And honesty brought us closer than silence ever had. Today, I still value peace, but I no longer confuse peace with disappearance. I understand now that being quiet is not the same as being kind. That love does not require self-erasure. And that my voice, even when soft, deserves space. If you learn to be quiet to survive, if you learn to stay small to keep things calm, I want you to know something. You are allowed to speak now. You are allowed to take up space. Your voice does not ruin peace. It completes it. And it is never too late to learn how to use it.